Saving medicinal and edible plants has to be a priority. Losing plant diversity to many factors. These specialty plants are disappearing at an alarming rate. Loss of plant diversity, the reasons: habitat loss, climate change, unsustainable harvesting, commercial exploitation, unfamiliarity of a plant's potential, sourcing of plant starts and seeds.
When I make these type of videos, I lose a whole bunch of subscribers. It is very odd to me that this happens. I don't get it. But anyways, I'm not going to stop making, these controversial videos. So this idea of biodiversity is very interesting because we're not understanding it in the right way. If you have all these different plants in your garden flourishes in such a way that is incredibly powerful. And the same thing applies to our food sources. The more diverse we eat, especially in the categories of fruits and vegetables, the healthier we are. And this idea of agriculture focusing on 150 different plants to 200 different species of vegetables and fruits is very intimidating for our health. They are practicing this idea of monoculture to the extent that they can be very profitable, growing the same produce over and over again. And this idea of our soils being so depleted because of this monoculture makes it really hard to promote this biodiversity in the produce section. It is getting worse and worse. We're probably going to go down to 100 different types of plant species for our food sources. So promoting biodiversity in our foods is incredibly important. Also, it is incredibly important keeping these species alive that aren't being promoted anymore. There are so many people here in Ecuador saying, oh, if I could only buy this, nobody's growing it anymore. Or if I could only buy that. It's happening already here in this small country where there's these like potato-like plants that don't exist anymore. It's really impossible to find them and to buy them. There are so many people that come into this garden and say, oh, you have this and you have that. Wow, that's interesting. It's so hard to find it. And this is interesting that these crops that are incredibly prolific and easy to grow aren't being grown anymore. So it's interesting how we're focusing on the same plants over and over again.
Humans consume the same 150 to 200 edible plants daily. Many amazing fruits and vegetables are not being grown anymore. Even though 30,000 plant species are edible, from the 350,000 known plant species, that's only 8.6%. 40% of modern medicine has been derived from plants. 14% of all plant species are used to heal humans and pets.
Yeah, I want to talk about medicinal plants and edible plants. Two categories, but they sort of overlap, and they're very important for the survival of the human race. We have so many plants that are being neglected, be it root crops, be it certain types of pears or apples. We're sort of losing this biodiversity in our food. Why? Because agricultural specialists are focusing on between 150 species to 200. And the other 28,800 species are being neglected in a very big way. These plants that are very beneficial to the human race are being depleted at astonishing rate. So there's many reasons why these medicinal and edible plants are disappearing. Specialization in agriculture is one of the biggest problems. People are growing a specialized crop. They grow, for example, lettuce only. So this specialization has really hurt the biodiversity of our food. There's habitat destruction. There's climate change. There's people over harvesting. So they'll find a clump of ginger in the wild and they'll take everything. They won't even leave 10% behind for it to regenerate itself. This human greed is a big problem with medicinal plants. Mushrooms, many things are just harvested to death, and they have no chance of replenishing themselves just because we're too aggressive with them. There's so many plants in this world that could feed more and more people. There's lots of beautiful root crops like potatoes and yams, and there's all this stuff that is just not being grown anymore. There's a lot of people in Ecuador complaining that they can't buy certain plants that they used to buy. Nobody's growing them anymore. There's this real misunderstanding of what medicinal plants really are. If it's profitable, people will grow it. If it's not profitable, it will go to the wayside. That is the big problem, is this idea of profitability in agriculture. Everyone is basically growing everything that makes them a good profit. Nothing wrong with that, but there has to be this safe network of keeping all this food diversity and medicinal diversity alive. How do you do that? Well, maybe you have to promote places where these seeds are stored, places where people are rewarded for growing unusual plants that are edible. What they did is they were courageous enough to eat these plants, to identify them as edible. Remember, seeing a plant and eating it are two different things. So there's been this real relationship between people trying their best to understand plant properties, what they do to the human body, what do they help with. There's all this stuff that goes on with plants that is very experimental. I'm sure there's been some human beings that have died experimenting on plants. I'm sure that a lot of people have really had a close connection to nature, and that super close connection has allowed them to understand what plants do, which plants do what. So there's this real connection towards nature between a living organism, which is an animal or a human, and the plants on the other side. Just the fact that these plants are digestible, just the fact that these plants have an influence on us, positive or negative, makes it worthwhile to really protect these plants in a big way. There are many apple varieties that are dying out. There are many medicinal plants that are being harvested to death. There are all these people trying to make money off plants, and that greed has taken a whole new twist, and people are just wiping out entire areas of medicinal plants. Forests are being cut down. Everything's being pushed to the brink, the edge of civilization, and that has really made it really hard for these medicinal plants to survive. So there has to be a real strong movement in bringing these plants back, keeping them moving forward, and this biodiversity, or this edible diversity, or this medicinal diversity has to be a big focus of agriculture in the future. The pharmaceutical companies are doing a better job because there's 40% of their products are plant-based. They're understanding what these plants do, how they do it, what the chemical compositions are. So there's a real push by the pharmaceutical industry to use plant material in a very positive way. If you really think about it, these plant materials that are very useful are actually showing the pharmaceutical industry what they do, what they can do, how they work, what the composition is. So it's very, very insightful when you look at plant material that is edible and can help with your health. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of these pharmaceutical researchers that are traveling the world to find plants, I think they're understanding this real urgency not to cut down all these rainforests and these areas that are working together so well. They have all these really unique plants that might be the cure for cancer. They might be a cough medicine. They might be whatever they will, whatever they can be turned into in terms of a product requires those plants to still be around in the future. And that is the problem, is we have this disappearance of edible plants and medicinal plants that is non-returnable. When you have a plant disappear from a rainforest, it will have an effect on the future. And you have to sort of say to yourself, okay, um, what are the consequences of not having a heart medication that is plant-based? What are the consequences of that? It's sort of this idea that we have to be very protective of plant life, because plant life might be the way to keep humanity healthy and alive.